Welcome to the Bound for Glory podcast. In this episode, we talked to my good friend, Mr. Kendal Osborne. He's a sound engineer, a producer, a songwriter. He operates a studio in Bixby, Oklahoma. It's a great conversation about creativity and how to work as a creative professional. You're not going to want to miss this conversation. Professional opinion, Kendal. Scale of 1 to 10, how bad?
10 being bad? Or
10 being bad, 1 being awesome.
I give it a 5. I've heard worse. I was just in OK Pop just a second ago. I did a tour, and man, since the rooms are all empty right now, it's like,
yeah.
I mean, it's like 8 seconds. You couldn't record anything in there. Yeah, it's pretty short. Yeah,
could be worse. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Sure.
All right, before we get started, there's a kind of a fun thing I want to do with all these episodes.
Okay.
And it helps to break the ice, get people to not stress so much. 2 questions we're going to ask everybody. I've been doing this for probably 5 or 6 years on my own as just like when I'm interviewing people, especially if somebody I don't know, it's just a fun way to break the ice. So
sure.
Honest answer, you can honest answer, or you can just plead the fifth and just move on. Okay. First question, have you ever seen a UFO?
No.
Do you
That's
know
an
anyone?
honest answer.
Do you know anyone that has
I do.
told you and you believe they're probably telling the truth?
Believe is a strong word. But yes, I really do. I really do. I do. I have some friends that have had some experiences, if you want to say that, and pretty believable experiences, but I've never seen anything.
They think it was like just an aircraft they couldn't identify, or they're like, dude, I saw an alien.
I don't know anyone who's seen like a being.
Yeah.
Right. But I know some people that have seen craft
in the sky.
And, I never have.
They leave it at that. They're not
pretty
curious.
much. Yeah. But they think it was, otherworldly.
Okay. So that's what I mean. They think not
military,
not like,
yeah.
Okay. Second question. Have you ever seen a ghost?
No.
Do you know anyone who has seen a ghost?
Not off the top of my head. Not that I know of.
No grandma stories about.
I did hear a story about a guy who saw the ghost of an old country singer. I can't remember the name, when he was touring his house in Alabama or wherever it was, and he was like, "Who was that guy that was there?" And they were like,
"Oh, like during a tour."
So like
he stopped.
And they were like, "There's no one here." And so of course since that time he's always been like, "Did they plant that guy there? Like, is that an actor?"
Yeah.
But he at first thought, he was like, "I think I saw a ghost," but then later he was like, maybe they put him there for the tour.
If I lived in a place like that where part of my income stream depended on people kind of thinking a ghost was there, I would totally hire someone to pretend to be a ghost.
Hire someone to be the ghost. Yes, absolutely.
It would be worth like a daily $50 a day to stick your head in a window and pretend like you're a ghost.
Have a conversation with some of the tourists.
Yeah.
And
even just to install some stuff in the attic, to push a button and make a noise. I don't know.
Yeah.
Must be the ghost
moaning,
of
some footsteps and moaning.
Oh, yeah. Well, at least half of the people I ask that to actually say yes, and they have stories. Probably more than half, which is interesting.
Yeah, I have never seen a ghost.
Okay. Well, I know it has very little to do with what you do professionally, but
that's true.
I thought it'd be a nice segue. So getting into who you are, I'm sure there's lots of layers to who Kendal Osborne is, but obviously music is your passion.
Indeed.
You own and operate Closet Studio out of Bixby, Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. Before we get into the history of the studio, could you give me a little background on maybe your journey into music? Has it always been a huge part of your life? At what age did you start to get into that? And just give me the, kind of broad strokes of kind of where you came into music.
So I wouldn't necessarily say I grew up in a musical family. My brother always played piano. Grew up in church. My parents, we'd sing in church and things like that. And so I was around music, but it wasn't like my mom plays, my dad plays, my aunt plays, but my brother played piano. he would take piano lessons here in town, and I took piano lessons when I was really young, 4, something like that. It's one of those programs you start kids really early. I hated it. I hated playing piano. I hated practicing. I didn't like the teacher. And so I quit. Did not do anything music related until probably maybe 10. I then was like, I kind of want to get into drums. So I took some drum lessons at Drum World. Kind of hated that after a little while too, and quit. And then sometime around 12 or 13, I started playing guitar, and I was like, yeah, I get this. And it made sense to me more than drums or piano, and I just liked it. And
you learned pretty quickly?
I learned pretty quick. I started teaching myself, and then, it made sense to me reading the books where they'd show a chord shape, and you're like, I just put my fingers there. Makes sense. And then I started taking lessons, and I played in bands when I was a teenager and through middle school, high school, early college. And the recording thing kind of just happened by accident, really. I didn't have money to record with other people. I wanted to be able to record my songs, or at least document them, right? This is before iPhones. Everyone had iPhones, right? Yeah. My phone, I don't even think had a video camera on it at the time. It was like maybe took pictures that were, and so it was like, well, I had a computer at home, and I had some basic software you could get. Back in the early days of SoundForge, Sony Vegas, Sony Acid, when Sony owned all that. And I had some of those, which were basically just GarageBand, essentially. It was very, very basic.
You were composing a lot at this time?
I was writing a lot of stuff. I was messing around with loops and stuff when it was kind of new and you could get it on your computer.
Loops, do you remember that program?
I do. That's still around. It's gotten a lot better.
I hope so.
Yeah. But this was even more basic. I mean, this was pretty much like GarageBand, where it was like you had all these pre-recorded drum loops and stuff, and I was trying to like write stuff to it. And, I'd been in bands, and it really only started when I started recording myself, and some friends of mine heard it. I put it up on MySpace at the time. That was, that was
you and Justin.
Yeah, that was the big thing, right? MySpace. And but there was a music player on MySpace. That was something that we lost with all the other social media, past that. But there was a music player, and so I put it up there, and I had some friends ask me like, "Hey, where'd you do that?" And I was like, "I actually did that myself." And they're like, "Hey, could you record me?" Side note: I don't have any money. And I was like, "Sure, why not?" And I kind of liked it. I kind of liked working with other people, and they'd be like...
How old were you when...
I was probably about 15, 16 when I started working with friends, and just friends from school mostly, right? And I didn't even know what to charge because I didn't want to do it for a job. That wasn't even my plan. It's funny, at that time, I actually wanted to be a documentarian. I wanted to make documentary films. That was what I wanted to do.
You never went into film school or anything, though? Just kind of music,
I took video classes.
Took over?
Yeah, I took some video classes in high school as electives, and I did a bunch of kind of just like, in the early days of YouTube, I would post some of my videos there, just funny videos, or I would make like kind of mini documentaries. I remember I made like a short little, probably 7 or 8 minute like mini doc about Virginia Tech shooting when that happened. That was something that was a big topic of conversation in that day. Other students and stuff, we were talking about it and interviewed a bunch of students. And so that's kind of what I wanted to do. And, not a lot of people know that I actually wanted to do film stuff. And then, but yeah, something happened sometime around 15, 16, 17, where I started working on some of my friends' songs, and it was just like, sure, I'll help you with that or whatever. And I started to kind of like that. And then I kept doing it more. And then I was like, well, maybe I could get $50 for this or $100 or something. It takes a lot of time, right? So I started charging some people, and then I had people saying like, "Oh, this sounds really good," for $100, I'd be like, "Okay, cool." So I just kind of kept doing it until I was like, I think this is what I want to do actually. And within 3 or 4 years, by the time I was 18, about graduating, I was like, that's definitely what I want to do.
But you didn't open the studio right away. I know you interned quite a bit. Like I feel like you took, from talking to you before this, like what I kind of wanted you to explain is maybe some of your perspective on the right path, because a lot of what this podcast, Bound for Glory, to us really just means that pursuit of excellence.
Sure.
Doesn't really matter what you're doing. And sometimes there's steps you need to take, especially I know in music production, like there's things you have to learn, and it's like, tell me a little bit about your path. Cause I know you kind of did things the right way as far as like you put in your time to know, because there's so many little things that you,
Sure.
if you don't know, you don't know.
Right.
But you only learn it from that 10,000 hours of putting that.
No,
Tell me a little bit
totally
about that.
Yeah. So I started calling my little home studio the Closet Studios in probably 2007. So this was after like 2 years of just like kind of doing it for friends for free. Never really thought about charging or anything. It's about 2007, 2008. I started calling it the Closet Studios, and it was just in my house, in my bedroom, basically, and started recording other people. And it really wasn't until that time, after just kind of stumbling around for a couple of years, learning what I could, reading books, I asked people for internships around town. There weren't really anyone who wanted to give me one. The record industry has changed so much. And so like I thought from reading books of pros, that's what you do. You get an internship. And kind of what they don't tell you is that the books are talking about people who got internships in the 70s, 80s, 90s, right? And it's like the record industry is different now, right?
Yeah.
So I was kind of confused. I was like, I thought that's the path. I thought that was the ladder. And it's like, well, it was for 50 years. The classic story. I mean, it's almost like a movie trope at this point of like,
you run and get coffee for 5 years, and eventually you're producing records.
I'll wrap cables, and then you win in Grammys. I just thought that was going to be the path, and of course, pretty much post Napster, everything had changed, right? So I tried to get some internships around. I eventually did get one when I was at TU, and I got an internship at the church. When it reopened, it had gone, different owners, and when I heard that they were reopening, I was like, "Please tell me you need an intern." I was like, "I go to TU. I'm gonna be right down there. I already recorded my own."
But you put yourself out there. You reached out. You're like, "I want to get involved."
I reached out on Craigslist. And I don't know why they posted it on Craigslist.
They were advertising on Craigslist?
They posted it on Craigslist. I was like, this is sketchy both ways, so it's fair. So I reached out and I was like, please, basically, I don't know if I begged, but they asked me a couple of questions like, do you know how to solder? And I was like, yeah. And they were like, cool, we might need you to do that. And I was like,
I can YouTube it.
All right. Yeah. And I knew a little, I knew how to make cables, but I wasn't great at it. And, they essentially tested me a little bit on like how I knew how to plug in mics and operate an Eve and just things like that. And I knew just from what I had absorbed over the last probably 5 years of doing it. And so I did that for a couple of years, and I was at school and I started getting pretty busy. I started taking what I did really seriously. I did learn a lot from that internship. I never really got paid. There was a few things I got paid for in special kind of situations, but I still learned a lot about working in that kind of environment. And I started taking my own business really seriously and dropped out of college. And maybe
Mom and Dad,
not sure
how
if I
feel about that.
My dad is a craftsman himself. He's worked as a mechanic his whole life. So I think to him it was like, sure, I mean,
do it.
You're good at that. Go do that. And if that's, if the new model is pretty much like entrepreneur rather than work your way up through the studio ladder, then go do that. So my parents were really supportive, actually. It was a tough pill to swallow because I was on scholarships, and it was like, why, you dummy? Why would you drop out of school? And I enjoyed school too. I went for accounting.
What were you? Oh, I was going to say.
I went for accounting, and it was really helpful to I don't know how to organize my money and keep track of it. And I learned a lot in accounting school. And I still use it to this day. I still use business knowledge and accounting knowledge.
Always going to pay taxes.
Yeah, exactly. And you got to stay organized with that stuff. I think a lot of creative businesses fail because they don't stay organized with that stuff. Expenses, making sure that you're not, just spending every single dime you make, but also trying to keep taxes at bay. It's a reality of the business. And self-employment, can be tough. You gotta stay on top of it. You gotta have goals and markers that you want to hit. You can't just be like, oh, I'll figure that out later in April. You know what I mean? It's like, no, you kind of have to stay on it. And as you know, in pretty much any creative industry, the money is not consistent.
It's feast or famine.
Yeah, and you have to kind of start thinking on a broader scale, right, of the year. And if you're going to think on the scale of a year, you got to keep track of it.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest thing for us as a small business is in your mind transitioning that. And you do have to be intentional about it. I'm not, you got to save money. You got to have cushions. You got to have multiple income streams for a while. You got to do what it takes. But that is the hurdle that I think a lot of people, if you've just worked a 9 to 5 and you're like, every 2 weeks I get a check.
The paycheck, right.
And it's always the same. Not, hey, it could be big this month and not so big next month. You know, it's just, because it is seasonal too, isn't it?
Sure.
Like I think almost all business is seasonal, but definitely music.
December's kind of slow.
Yeah, film is the same way.
April's
December,
kind of
January,
slow
always slow.
With self-employment. You got to think about your clients. Who are my clients? And for me, it's like, well, if a lot of my clients are self-employed musicians, then April's rough for them.
Yeah,
and that means it's rough for me.
That's when you go to Branson.
Yeah, and that's when like December, same thing. It's like, you don't make Christmas albums in December. You make them in September.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're way ahead.
Yeah.
And so like no one has spare money. They're playing some holiday gigs and they're trying to relax. Not a whole lot of outdoor gigs. Almost no touring. So December slow. April slow. September hit or miss. And I thought over the years it would even out more, and it's like sort of, but
really?
It's still a little bit, the range is not as feast or famine, but it's still not, I make the same every month, right? Like, and that's something that, like, if you want to ease the mind, then you have to,
know the numbers.
Yeah, know the numbers, zoom out, think about it big picture, and it becomes a lot less stressful when you're, thinking about a big picture, and when you're planning on, for example, like paying March bills with December money, right? It's like, I'm thinking way ahead. I'm zoomed out. I'm not worried if
no one ever says like, God, I wish I wasn't so prepared.
I know, right? Yeah, no, exactly. And so I learned a lot in accounting school about that. And I learned a lot in, I started actually in just business management, and I went into accounting, and I learned a whole lot. It was really helpful. So yeah, to anyone out there, I did
do the numbers.
Yeah, not necessarily saying don't go to school, because I learned a lot in school. But recording degrees, that's another story. Never went to school for recording, really. I did do the Tulsa Tech program when I was in high school.
Which you also helped teach that now.
Which I ended up doing teaching the night class for a number of years. I actually just kind of stopped doing that. But I taught for almost 10 years.
How did you like that? Like, do you like teaching?
I love teaching. Yeah, it's my mom's a teacher. My dad was a teacher for a short time. My grandma was a teacher. So that's maybe in the blood. I don't know. But I really like teaching. And Tulsa Tech is great. I mean, I'm a big believer in what they're trying to do, which is trades. You don't have to spend $80,000 to go get an associate's, or $200,000 to get a bachelor's. You can spend a couple thousand and learn to be an electrician and make $150 an hour.
It helps to just be aiming at something.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like knowing, like, that's something I could do, rather than just kind of the.
Yeah, and you have
just
options.
Go to college.
Yeah, you have
just
options that aren't that. And if the idea for young people, and I see it in my students all the time, terrified of like, should I go to college for this? Will I be able to get a job in a studio? And
you just tell them no.
I just pretty much tell them no, right? I was like, you can, it might help, but that is a large amount of money to gamble for that, right?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, if you just got really good at it in the next 4 years, the studio might hire you over the other guy. Because
especially now, I mean, we get it when people want to work with us. It's just like, send me your reel.
Yes.
It's like,
show me what you've done.
I don't really care where you're from, who you are, what you're doing. Show me your reel. If it's a good reel, great.
Yeah, that's how I've hired interns and assistants. Is like, show me something you've done. If you went to school, awesome, cool, good for you. I my assistant now, he went to school for it. My intern before, he didn't. I'm like, I'm going to pick the person that I think is the most qualified.
Yeah,
period.
that's all that matters.
If they went to school, that's on them. But like, I'm not going to just pick someone because they went to school.
It's good to know. Well, when did you actually open the location you're at now? How did you transition from the house to the actual studio?
Yeah, so it was more of a home studio, like in a bedroom, converted vibe for probably 5 years, 5-6 years. And I knew that I needed a dedicated building to really get like acoustically to actually make it sound good, because most bedrooms are built in even number dimensions, 8-foot ceiling, 14 by 16 by 8 feet or whatever. It's like all divisible.
Did you build that whole structure that you're at now, or is that something you converted?
Pretty much. So there was a freestanding garage there on the south side, and we basically tore off the roof, tore off the sidewalls, tore off the front wall. So part of the slab and the back wall was there. And this support beam we had to leave there because it was a structural beam. But we pretty much gutted it, and built 75% of it from scratch.
Because you did like walls within walls kind of sound. Tell a little bit about like the sound treatment you did for it.
For soundproofing purposes, you need a double wall assembly, and that a lot of people get those wrong. There's a lot of bad information about it on the internet, but essentially it's a mass air mass system. So as much mass as you can on the outside, as much air as you can in the middle, and as much mass as you can. So, for example, with double walls, a lot of people will build, drywall, stud, drywall, space, drywall, stud, drywall. But the mass is not...
It needs more mass to stop it.
That's a mass air, mass air, mass air, mass system. If you move those center pieces of drywall to where it's drywall, drywall, stud, space, stud, drywall, drywall, same materials, same cost, 15, 20 dB better isolation.
Really?
So like I got way into learning about that because I couldn't afford to hire an acoustics person. I did hire some people to answer some questions, some consulting people, but I couldn't afford to have them design it or actually come out.
And you do some of that now professionally too.
I do a little bit of that. Yeah. I've slowed down a little bit doing that. I'm so busy with studio stuff, but
it's a valuable thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's tools in the belt is what I like to say. So it's like, maybe you don't use it every day, but definitely is a big part of your
world.
And
so I designed the room. I tried to learn as much as I could about electrical and air conditioning and wall building and floors and all of that stuff, treatments, of course. And I still, didn't know all there is to know. The analogy I've used before in my class is like learning about any creative field, audio, videography, any of that. It's kind of like diving into a cave and you're like, oh, this is a cool pond. And then you realize it's a network of caves. And then you keep diving down and you're like, oh, wait, there's another cave.
It never ends.
It never ends. There's always something deeper that you think, I know a lot about that. And then you dive down and you're like, oh, I know nothing about this.
I've always said that like every shoot, every gig, every whatever, like, I mean, if you're not coming away with it with something that like, oh, that could have been better.
Yeah, you weren't paying attention.
You're drunk or something. I don't know. But there's always going to be something. There's probably...
I learn stuff all the time on sessions.
There's very few people like a Kubrick or something who's just so good they could be just perfect. But
sure. Yeah.
Rest of us.
Mortals.
So how many artists do you think you've tracked collectively?
Gosh, I don't know. I work on about 120 songs a year, and I've been doing this 17 years.
So who is your favorite artist that you've ever tracked? No, I'm just kidding. Okay, another question. So thinking of artists, you've seen some evolution from where you started, where you are today. Since you work with so many different artists, what are artists today getting right, and what are they getting wrong?
It's a great question. I think one of the things I've been obsessed with lately is thinking about marketing and branding for artists. I've been working on this video that I'm going to try to put out for people to help with them and with that. And I think part of it is that in a way we were all kind of conned with social media. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It used to be called social networking.
Yeah.
Now it's social media, right? So we have this idea that it's like, oh, this is a network. And then it's like actually how these things work is in media, pay to play, advertised. Right. Yeah. That's how they work. Sorry, but that is how they work. That's how much of the internet works. And so I think musicians, one of the biggest problems is they spend their whole careers focusing on their network only, marketing to the same 50 people that will come to their show, the same 50 people. And then, sure, if you have a big band, if you have a 10-member band, right, like your network goes a little farther, right? That's quite a few people. But there's a lot of overlap, and I see actually very few artists marketing at all.
Do you think that is they're just not budgeting for it. And it's like, because I've seen a lot of artists do it. They're like, I need to make the record. And then they've literally done no music video,
right?
No, gear, no
artwork,
no campaigns on social media.
Right.
I mean, if you're not running, why make a record if you're not going to spend anything to market it?
Yeah, no, I think it's really sad because something that I think a lot of artists maybe don't think about is the people who work really hard on those records that see hundreds of records I've worked on released to no one. And it's not because they're not good. You know what I mean? Some of them are amazing. But a lot of people are just kind of like, oh, shucks, like I just do this for fun, right? It's like, I know you do it for fun. The internet's broken.
Yes.
You have to play the game to make it work, right? And sure, I get it. When you look at big artists, it can seem like they're not really doing anything. It's like, that's because they don't have to. Taylor Swift
but they still do.
They still do.
Even big artists, they have agencies, they have managers and agents, and they do paid campaigns all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I was looking at, not a musician, but there's a one of the top performing social media, video players out there, in more of a political space. I mean, he spends like $2 million a year on advertising and
Coca-Cola, Taco Bell, like
a lot.
To us, we might be thinking like, why does Coca-Cola need to have ads? It's like they spend $40 million a year on ads. It's like they do it because they know that it actually still makes a difference. It
does. So how much? Say you're an indie band, you're tracking your EP. How much focus should somebody be putting on? I mean, I don't know if you want to talk numbers as far as budget. Like I think. Normal businesses, it's something like anywhere from 15 to 30% of your budget should be towards advertising and marketing. For bands, like what should they be thinking of when they want to track a record or anything?
I think the most important part, regardless of how much you want to spend on it, $100, $1,000 for advertising or marketing stuff or branding stuff, is just to have a strategy, just to be thinking ahead of like, okay, because I see a lot of artists do the thing where they're like, we got this new song, we want to track it. And they track it, we mix it, they master it, and they're like, awesome, can't wait to release it. It's like, hold on, think about it for a sec, right? Like,
maybe you can wait to release it.
First of all, and I say this in the nicest way possible because I don't want this ever to sound offensive, but it's like, who's waiting for it? Mm-hmm. Is a label like threatening to sue you? Okay, then maybe you gotta give it to them. But if they're not, if you're an independent artist with 100% control over your music, why are you hurrying up to get it out so that people can pay you 3.8% of a penny or 3.8 cents per penny, to stream it, right?
Kind of depressing me, but
right. It's like, what's your hurry? It's like, whereas if you have your finished product and you're like, okay, I think this is good. And then you have a strategy for releasing it, for maybe making a video, for making lyric videos, for making promo stuff with, some of the stuff like you have for your songs where it'll be like a really cool piece of artwork with the song playing. Mm-hmm. It's not even a music video. It's just
something
that is a promo type material. Thinking about that stuff, giving yourself time, just wait. Mm-hmm. And then that can get a lot more mileage than just like, we got to get it out as soon as possible.
But I'm sure it's different with every band. It's have a goal. What's your goal?
Yeah.
Your goal is to, be on Spotify or whatever it might be. Have a website.
Get
more fans. Book more gigs.
Yeah.
Identify that and then have a strategy to work towards it.
Right. And I think it's important. Have you read Rick Rubin's book?
I've read bits and pieces of it. I think I agree with a lot of what I've heard him say about it.
Yeah, I'm kind of this side and that side. Some things I'm like, but one thing I love that he says in there that I think is really encouraging for artists to remember is like the fact that you wrote music and recorded it, it's already an artistic success, right? Like we're talking about commercial success over here. That's something else. The success of the art of you expressing yourself, you did it.
That's a good point.
You already did it. Like, be proud of that. Like, not everyone can write a song. Not everyone can record a song. Not everyone can. It can be a lot of work to put down an EP or an album.
Yeah.
And so it's like you're already successful as an artist for doing that.
What was the other thing? I think even we were talking about that he said from the book that kind of about the difference between like making art for yourself or for someone else.
Sure. Yeah.
I can't remember exactly how he said
he talks about how, you can say that, you're making art for the listener. He's like, but you're the first listener.
Yes, that's right.
Right?
You don't.
You can't ever really make it solely for them. You kind of have to make it for you.
I remember hearing recently, what's the guy's name from Wonderwall guy that is...
Gallagher.
Gallagher, yeah. He was talking about how... He was going through a list of artists that were like, people didn't get Hendrix, Sure. He's classic, but it was like classic after classic. It was like, at first nobody knew they wanted that. Yeah. And his conclusion was like, the customer never knows what they want.
Right.
You give it to them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you create the art, you give it to them. It resonates with them or it doesn't.
Yeah.
But you don't, if you're just, and maybe that's where we are, some with what people are getting wrong today is I think he's just talking about how if you're just looking to say, well, what do they want? What do they want? What do they want? I mean, that's just...
You'll be let down. Yeah.
Well, or you're just going to make garbage. That's like, well, that's,
right. Well, it's, another thing is that it's actually way harder to market generic stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Like...
Because you're in an ocean
right.
of
Like
possibility.
Coca-Cola, for example. It's like, everybody drinks liquid. Mm-hmm. And so that's why their budget is so high. It's like, we're trying to market drinks to the world. That is way harder than this very specific thing for this very specific niche that really needs it. I heard a story recently of a woman who, I don't remember exactly what her business was, but she does something in regards to like healthcare billing help, for like small practices and stuff. She has 3,800 or 5,800, somewhere in the 3,000 to 6,000 follower range. She makes almost $1 million a year, and she has super small niche on Instagram, under 6,000 followers.
We've seen a lot of that actually lately.
But she really knows her specific market and knows...
Maybe that's the advice is like we're moving into more of a niche world where it's like, your people, you might be a Taylor Swift, but, more realistically, most like you could do really well with yours 10,000,
right?
Whatever that might be.
Well, and people forget that like at one time Taylor Swift was a niche market. Yeah, she was doing like country songs for teenagers, basically, and people still kind of joke about that. Oh, her music's for teen girls. It's like not anymore.
No,
not anymore. Like it was for like teen girls who like country music, and she grew. And I think that's one of the biggest things I've seen from reading from pro marketers who do this for big brands. To start as specific and narrow as you can and then grow it. It's a lot harder to say, okay, let's market this to the world. It's kind of like the analogy I use sometimes. It's like, imagine going into like a football stadium, like full of people, right? Mm-hmm. And being like, anybody here into juggling? You know what I mean? Or like some specific thing, right? Some specific hobby. You might find someone, right? But it will take you all day, possibly days, to find that one person, and then you got to bring them with you. You could just look up juggling conventions in your area. You know what I mean? Like, find the specific thing.
Where the action is. Yeah, I've heard people say that, and it makes
be honest with yourself about what your thing is. Yeah. Right? Like, it's okay that
wait. You're saying know thyself?
Yes.
Is that
yes, that's exactly right.
Is that a Kindle-ism? No.
I think I'm the first one to say that. But yeah, there's a lot of artists who kind of aren't honest with themselves about their music. They're like, well, anyone could like this. It's like, no, the average person, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to sound mean. It's like,
as somebody who makes music that I know is not for everyone.
It's very niche, right?
It's like,
but it works.
My people.
Yes. Yeah. And like, there are tons of people that would love your music. People. That's another thing is people get overwhelmed and they think
they're all on Reddit.
There's a lot of those. People get overwhelmed and they think they need 300 million followers like Taylor Swift. And it's like, no, you don't actually.
It's a weird thing just with our culture today because there's so many kids that like, what are you going to be? What are you going to do? And it's just like a blanket,
YouTuber.
Be famous.
Yeah.
Just be famous. And it's like, all right, well, good luck with that.
Right.
I don't know if that's even what you want.
Right. Yeah. I think what most people really want when it comes to like their music is like, I want to have fans that love what I do, and I want to be able to do what I want to do, not pressure from market or from label or from manager, whatever. I want to make the music that I love most, even if it's weird, even if it's niche, even if it's like Celtic math metal, you know what I mean? Like really specific thing. You can find 10,000 people that love that, and you can make a whole career with 10,000 followers.
They're at Scott Fest every year here in Tulsa.
I mean,
right, Nick?
And so, I think on at least in terms of sort of the music business, I think that's probably one of the biggest mistakes is people just kind of not understanding the kind of key terms and understanding that like it's not as scary as you think, it's not as hard as you think, it's not even as expensive as you think. It's a lot cheaper to market.
And a lot of what you're saying too, like all of that equals be yourself.
Yes.
It's like be authentic.
Yeah.
Don't try to be something you're not. Know who you are and be that and own that, and you'll find your audience.
Because what if it works? What if you are not authentic and you're making something you don't even like and it works? Then you'll hate yourself. You'll be miserable.
What do you think makes the difference between an artist and a performer? What's a great artist? What's a great performer?
I think a great artist has vision.
I'd agree with that.
I don't know if a performer needs vision. They need skill. They need talent. They need charisma, all those things. But they don't necessarily need vision. I think a great artist really knows what their music is, and they could describe it to you, and maybe it'd be in pictures or in word, but and I've seen the difference, right? Like I've seen it firsthand working with.
Because I ask that because it's usually sometimes it's both, but it seems it's very rare. It's like usually they're the artist or the performer, and there's a lot of artists that don't know they're artists and performers that don't know they're performers.
Right. Yeah.
Performers that like keep trying to write a song, and it's like. Yeah, you need a songwriter. You're just not a great songwriter.
Yeah, and like I can tell the difference just even in frankly, how good the final product comes out when the artist has so much vision. Because like I'm just one guy, you know what I mean? Like I can't be responsible for everybody's vision. Or a good friend of mine who's an engineer likes to say like, if you bring me a song that has 25% vision, it's going to sound like 75% like me. And he's like that. You might like that, cool, but if you want to sound like you, like
you got to know where
you got to
you're
know,
going.
yeah. And I've worked with those artists that I kid you not, like I could play them something on piano, and they'll be like, "That's not the right piano sound," and I'm like, "How do you know?" They're like, "I just hear it. I know, I know," and it's like, "Wow, you've really thought about this." And another argument I might give for that is like a band like Phoenix or Wilco or someone with like kind of their sound, right? Like we know like Wilco's got their sound. Do they not sound like that live? You know what I mean? It's like they've crafted that thing.
They know.
With basic live microphones, Shure stuff, you know what I mean? Just basic gear. They still sound like Wilco. And they've spent 30 years crafting that sound. And I think the true purest definition of the artist, would be someone who really like not only expresses things, but like sees them, has the vision to express it, right? Lots of people can paint. You can hire people to paint your house. That doesn't make them an artist, right?
Yeah.
They might be. Now, an architect might be a little different because they might have the vision for what the house needs to look like, even if they don't swing the hammer. You know what I mean? Like, they're not performing the building of the house, but they're designing. They have the vision.
Yeah, they have to know.
And that's a different, very different muscle.
I've learned that as a writer, maybe even we talked about that at some point, but like that's not something I used to know.
Sure.
But like as a producer, as a director, as a writer, if whatever that side of it, it's like I see that now as like when I go into like to do a record or to work on video or whatever, it's like in my head, it's like that's my job. I'm like, it's my job to be the one to say, this is what we're doing, guys. This is where we're going.
Yeah.
And I used to, I'd hired producers in the past that, I'd just kind of pass it off to them. Sure. But maybe there's a place for that when you're young and you're just starting out. But eventually when you want to transition, like you're saying, like more of an artist, you have to be the one to say, this is my vision. Yeah. This is what it's going to be like.
And it also could be tied into things like Eddie Van Halen, right? Like his sound on guitar. It's like he spent his whole life getting that sound, tweaking his guitars, customizing his guitars, getting different amps. There's a famous story about him working with Peavey on the 5150 amp, and they sent him a prototype to try out, and he sent it back, and there was wires hanging out of it, and he had taken screws out of the cabinet, and they're like, what happened to the screws? And he's like, no, you need to produce it with those screws out of the back of the cabinet. And they were like, huh?
But he had a reason for everything.
Yeah, he tested every screw removed from the cabinet and only screwing in this.
That's insane.
Because he was that obsessed with, like, I need to find the perfect thing. Like, I don't want the back of the cabinet to be too stiff but not too loose. And they were like, okay, so the earliest runs of 5150s had missing screws in the back of the cabinets from Peavey. But that's the kind of level of vision, right? Where it's like, he knew.
Well, and I've always said this too, is no one accidentally becomes that successful. Mm-hmm. No one wakes up and they're accidentally a multi-million billionaire, whatever, where no one wakes up and like you're accidentally Van Halen.
No.
You just, it's a very, there's so, I mean, I remember early on listening to interviews with Tom Petty, and when he's talking about the business side of being a musician, and like if you look up those interviews, it's like right away, oh, that's a business guy.
Yeah.
Like, and he's a genius.
He's very smart
business guy.
Yeah.
And you could tell it's like he didn't just get up there and write great songs. Like he did that, but he also built a brand.
Yeah, he was clever.
And a business and a franchise that's just lived on past him. And it's kind of sucks that it takes all of that to be somebody great, but that's why you're great. You're not just waiting to get a record deal or waiting to
nobody's coming for you. You know what I mean? That's another
Can I put
harsh,
that on a shirt?
I know, right?
Nobody's coming for you, Kendal.
Yeah, right? It's like I hate admitting it, but we all know it's true. It's like no one's coming for you. Now again, we might get like a romantic view of the 70s. Oh, they discovered you in a bar, and that's not a thing. You know what I mean? If anything, they're coming for your TikTok page to see how many followers you have, but maybe not.
Yeah.
and also, you don't need them. Like you
not
really
necessarily,
don't.
No.
You can do this stuff on your own and make a career. And I know people that have full-time music careers from, again, 10,000, 20,000 followers, not hundreds of millions, not even 2 million. Phoenix, that band, they don't even have 1 million followers.
Yeah.
290,000.
It's enough.
It's enough. They tour the world. You know what I mean? They don't even have 1 million followers, and they tour the world.
Well, people ask me, because a lot, especially if I don't see them, but they're always like, "Oh, you still playing music?" And I do more film and video stuff now, but it's like I play a gig a month.
Sure.
I'll play a gig, and for me, that's enough for me. It's like, and they're like, do you want to travel? And it's like, I don't. I really don't want to go on the road. Like I don't. I'm very blessed to be doing what I'm doing, where I'm doing it right now, and it's a lot of fun to just go play the gigs that I want to play, and that's about it,
Yeah,
so.
and you can design your life around that.
Yeah,
it might be difficult. There might not be a clear path.
Well, I'm not selling out Red Rocks, but I'm playing music, and I'm doing it on my terms where I have a lot of kids. I got a lot at that place in life.
Yeah,
maybe 20 years ago it'd be different, but where I am today, no, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I found something I wanted to show you.
Okay.
So, as a sound guy, I was in Branson last week, and I ran across this guy who was a street performer, and his name he goes by was Jackson Cash.
Okay.
You don't follow me on social enough to know. Have you seen this?
I don't. Maybe.
He was so good that when he sat, and he's in like shorts and a cut off shirt, like he just kind of unassuming looking guy. When he started singing, I looked at my wife looked at me, and I said, "That's a track. Like he's not actually singing to that." But then he started like talking and making up parts, and it was like he sounds exactly like Johnny Cash.
Wow!
I want you to hear it and see what you think. I'm gonna hold up to the thing. It's the best I can do, Nick. Sorry.
Well, my daddy left home when I was 3, and he didn't leave much for Ma and me. Just this old guitar and an empty bottle of booze.
Wow, that does sound like him.
Now, I don't blame him because he run in here, but the meanest thing my daddy ever did was before he left, he went and named me Sue.
Isn't that wild?
I must have thought it was quite a joke. He got a lot of laughs from lots of folks. It seemed I had to fight my whole life through. Some gal would get
It does sound like a track. I mean, I get it.
And I bust his head. I'll tell you, life ain't easy for a boy named Sue.
Great song.
Isn't that wild?
Wow, that is wild.
So even you're like, yeah,
Sure.
that sounds like Johnny Cash.
Yeah, now even with that, that's a tricky thing when it comes to like, there are tons of people I work with that are like amazingly talented but have no vision.
That's a performer.
Right.
The guy
Amazing
could- yeah.
performer, right? And
Not-
that's like, you know, but who knows? He could go into a studio and be like, I know what I want my record to sound like. And it's nothing like Johnny Cash, but I'm going to be singing
Yeah.
on it like that. And people in the room would be like, okay, let's explore it. Let's see. But if he was like, I don't know, it's probably going to end up sounding like Johnny Cash.
It's like the opposite of me though, because I've always been frustrated that when I sing, my voice only sounds like me.
Sure.
Just have a very unique voice. I get that, but I could never be a very good cover artist because if I'm trying to cover a song, I'm never going to sound like that artist.
Right.
It's always going to sound like me, but it's a double-edged sword because then
Yeah. Have you ever heard Mark Martel?
I don't think so.
He's the official lead singer for the Queen Extravaganza cover band,
Oh, okay.
which is like managed by Brian May. And like,
Oh, really?
they have the blessing of, you know what I mean? Mark Martel is an amazing singer. but
Sounds just like
sounds just like Freddie Mercury, maybe better.
Oh, really?
I mean, he
Wow.
nails it. But he has expressed many times on social media and stuff. He's like, I used to hate my voice because I only sound like Freddie Mercury. No one will ever care what I sound like because I sound like Freddie Mercury. And
You're in good company.
yeah, blessing and a curse, right? It's like, so you can either get frustrated that you only sound like you or get frustrated that you only sound like someone else.
Yeah.
You know,
I don't know.
everyone's frustrated.
It is.
Everyone's-
My kids were all kept asking me about that. Like, how did he sound exactly like him? I just don't. That's a blessing. It's like a gift. I don't know. The guy's like,
Sure.
he's not tricking you. He just sounds like Johnny Cash.
Yeah,
you know?
it's like he's not really an impersonator.
Well, he was, I think, for a while. I talked to him for a bit, and I think he had a show in Branson. Then the theater burned down, and
Whoa.
sounds like he's had on some hard times. But I thought, like, golly, what a gift, you know,
Yeah.
to just sound exactly like that.
Yeah, he does sound good.
Yeah,
You know,
nice guy, Jackson Cash. Check him out.
Jackson Cash.
I think we're about ready to wrap, but I wanted to leave. I guess what advice would you give to maybe somebody wanting to go down the path that you've gone down, thinking about this idea of pursuing excellence, bound for glory? What would you say to somebody who, because it's quite a bit different, even from when you started
Yeah.
where you are now? What should they be doing? What should they be looking for?
So lately I've been kind of obsessed with this this idea. It's a Japanese word. It's shokunin. And a lot of people have talked about like the whole ikigai concept, you know, it's like what you like and what people need and what you can get money for. And it's
Okay.
like find this sort of happy medium there. But I'm kind of a little more obsessed with the shokunin philosophy, which is more like the closest word we have in English is probably like craftsman or artisan. But if you've ever seen like travel documentaries or food documentaries or whatever, it's like when we're talking about Japanese artisans, we're talking about something different, right? It's like this guy's been making swords the way that his grandfather
yeah.
made it for 900 years.
Okay.
That's what they mean by that, right? And these guys are obsessed with getting it right and really learning as much as they can about the exact rope that I use on the sword, the exact materials, the exact wood I use for this part, the engraving, all that stuff, right? So I think with that in mind, like my advice would be like, you kind of really have to be obsessed with the craft of it, right? Like really get into it. If you're just trying to do it for clicks or likes or short-term gains, probably not going to work. A lot of this stuff in the creative world, whether it's music, audio, video, photo, takes a long time to get good at,
Yeah.
to get a good reputation, to build up your brand. We're talking
Don't be
10,000
afraid to
hours.
work. You got to work.
10,000
You gotta-
hours is a starting place,
Yeah.
right? Like we're talking, I've done this for 17 years, probably minimum 40 hours a week. So you can do the math yourself. You know, it's like for basically as soon as I built the studio, the current building, which was in 2013, basically from then until last year, I worked about 60 to 75 hours a week, every week, 6-7 days a week.
And you still feel like you have things to learn.
Oh yes, and that's the thing. Similar to those artisan sword makers, right? It's like those guys. This guy will be 90 years old and he's still trying to make the perfect sword.
Mm-hmm.
But it's that obsession with like, I'm doing this because the craft matters, and like getting it perfect is the pursuit.
So probably having a mentor
That
is
could
a
help.
big help.
Yeah.
To have somebody that's kind of guiding you and
just being patient, that like you're not late, you're not behind. You know what I mean? Like, this is a long game, and people like Chris Stapleton didn't even get popular until they were late 30s, you know, and some people, Max Martin, right? It's like some of those guys don't get even known by the public until they're 40 or 50. And it's like, so especially you see it with young kids that they're in such a hurry to be great. And it's like,
it's almost like I'm really glad that some of my first recordings never even touched the internet.
sure. No, I know exactly
it's okay
what you mean.
for you to track some stuff that no one ever has to listen to.
Oh, yeah.
And probably, I'd say that for the artists out there, your first 20 songs, don't release them.
Right.
It's just something that you're just
Maybe
learning.
not, yeah.
Unless Kendal listens to it and says you should really release that, don't do it. Just
I mean,
keep working at it.
But yeah, just that, like take it seriously, treat it with respect, like a craft, whether it's music or anything, any creative pursuit, even being a chef. You know, people are really into that. It's like they take it seriously. It's not to the point of like, I take it so seriously that I can't enjoy it. Not like that, but like treat it with respect and play the long game and learn, you know, just, hey, I'm on a path, right? And I'm in it for the struggle. I'm in it for the path.
I heard Kevin Costner had a quote about like his job, and he said, I take my job very seriously, but I know it's not a serious job. And I thought as an entertainer, as an artist, that's where you want to be.
Sure.
Like, take it seriously, but no one's going to die if you don't, you know, do this chord right or whatever it might be.
Right. No, yeah. And that's, exactly right. I love that.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming on, man.
Dude, of course.
All right. Cheers.